Well, welcome back to Things You Don't Know. I am Chandler Foster, and I am here today with my esteemed co hosts, Dr. William Weaver, who has a great knowledge in everything from music, from football to psychology, and Dr. Sean Deneen, one of the most divine historians of our day.
Thank you, Chandler. I'm a little flattered by that, but
Well, I am too. And we appreciate your fresh perspectives and your challenging and inquisitive questions. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
Yes, indeedy. So today we're talking about Earth Day. Earth Day, where it came from, why it mattered, when it started, and it still matters now, and why does it still matter now, and what it really says about the relationship between human beings and the world we live in.
ladies and gentlemen, Earth Day is not just a symbolic observance. It began in the United States on April 22nd, 1970, helped launch the modern environmental movement, and pushed environmental protection onto the national agenda in a much bigger way than before. The first Earth Day involved roughly 20 million Americans.
20 million, that's a lot, for the first time, don't you think?
Quite so. And its momentum helped shape major policy changes, including the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency under President Nixon later that same year.
And that alone is worth pausing over. Let's just think about that for a second. 20 million people. Wow. That means that Earth Day wasn't just a classroom project or somebody's nice idea. It was a giant public statement that clean air, clean water, and a healthier environment were not just side issues.
Exactly. And for 2026, the Global Earth Day theme is Our Power, Our Planet, which emphasizes the idea that ordinary people, local communities, educators, workers, and families still matter in environmental progress.
So today, let's do three things. First, we'll talk about the history of Earth Day. Second, we'll talk about what Earth Day is really trying to accomplish. And third, we'll talk about what meaningful action looks like beyond slogans.
Beyond slogans. Okay. So, Dr. Deneen, would you set the historical stage for us? What kind of America gave rise to Earth Day?
An America in which it was becoming harder to ignore environmental issues. By the late 1960s, industrial growth had brought unprecedented prosperity, but also pollution that people could actually see, smell, and breathe. Rivers caught fire, smog hovered over the cities, oil spills made national headlines. Public concern was growing, and Senator Gaylord Nelson of Wisconsin realized that environmental damage had not become just a scientific issue but a civic one. He proposed a national environmental teach-in, and that idea became the first Earth Day.
Before you can go any further, Chandler, uh, did you hear what he said? Rivers caught fire?
Yes, I did.
And that really happened. I wish we had time to get into that, but we don't. So, but I just wanted to point that out. Rivers caught fire. That is true. So, anyhow,
That's a remarkable thing.
yes.
So basically, Earth Day was born from frustration.
Yes, Chandler. Frustration, concern, and timing. The date of April 22nd was chosen strategically to draw in college students, placing it between spring break and final exams. Organizers wanted maximum participation. Dennis Hayes helped broaden the effort into a nationwide movement, and it quickly grew beyond the campuses.
That matters because it reminds us Earth Day wasn't originally just about recycling a soda can or planting a tree for a photo opportunity. It was also about public health, civic responsibility, and collective pressure.
And that gives Earth Day a little more edge than people sometimes realize. We tend to remember it as cheerful, green, and full of kids holding posters, but its roots were more forceful than that.
They were. The first Earth Day is often described as the birth of the modern United States environmental movement. And ladies and gentlemen, that is not an exaggeration. It brought environmental concerns for the first time into mainstream political life.
So, in a sense, Earth Day helped move environmental concern from some people care about this to the country has to deal with this.
Oh, and Dr. Weaver, that right there is a big shift. It changed environmental issues from background noise into something politically unavoidable.
Whoa, you said that so well. Something politically unavoidable, Chandler. So let me kind of get you into this a little bit more. Why do you think Earth Day connected so strongly with people then and still does now?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Dr. Weaver, because the basic idea is easy to understand. People live inside systems they depend on, like air, water, soil, climate, parks, crops, fisheries, cities that don't overheat, roads and homes that aren't constantly threatened by flooding or extreme weather. Even if someone is not using technical language, they understand that a damaged environment eventually shows up in daily life.
Well, yeah, that is really well said. Environmental problems can sound abstract until they become personal. Asthma rates, contaminated water, loss of shade in cities, rising utility costs, more intense storms, crop problems, heat stress. Suddenly, the environment is no longer a distant concept. It is where you live.
And in recognition of that, Earth Day grew from a United States movement into a global one. It is now observed in more than 190 countries from Angola to Zanzibar, with participation measured in the hundreds of millions to over a billion people worldwide, depending on how one counts participation.
And to me, that global spread is pretty interesting because different countries may not agree on everything politically, but there is a united front here. Nearly everybody understands the need for breathable air, drinkable water, and a stable place to live.
Yeah, those are kind of important things.
Oh, yeah.
And Earth Day also adapted. In the early years, the emphasis was often on visible pollution. Over time, the conversation expanded to include climate change. And I'm not saying climate warming or global warming, I'm saying climate change, which is different and more inclusive, biodiversity loss, plastics, conservation, environmental justice, and the health effects of degraded environments.
The shift reflects history also. Every generation inherits a different environmental conversation. One generation fears smog and industrial dumping, another worries about the climate, warming oceans, drought, wildfires, or microplastics.
So Earth Day remains relevant because the underlying question endures. If we do not heed science and protect our environment, the world we leave behind might not even support human life as we know it.
Oh, yeah, that is so true. One thing I think Earth Day gets right is that it connects ethics with practicality. Caring for the planet is not only morally appealing, it is also practical.
That's right, Dr. Weaver. And if a city plants trees, it can reduce heat. If a community protects wetlands, it can reduce flooding. If homes and schools waste less energy, that can cut costs. If a river is cleaner, that helps ecosystems and people.
Well put, Chandler. And historically, one of the strengths of Earth Day is that it translated concern into action. The first Earth Day didn't solve everything, but it gave the people a framework for organizing around environmental protection.
That is a point worth holding on to. Earth Day is not magic. It does not fix pollution simply because a date appears on the calendar. But it can focus attention, and focused attention can become public pressure, education, and policy.
Exactly. And maybe behavior too, because people always ask, what difference does one person make? That can sound small, but multiplied across neighborhoods, schools, churches, companies, and cities, one person becomes a pattern.
Exactly. Individual action is not the whole answer, but it is not meaningless either. Earth Day's 2026 theme, Power, Our Planet, leans into that idea. Power is distributed. Not all of it sits in one office, one law, or one institution.
Dr. Weaver, let me ask you this. When people hear about Earth Day, they often think of symbolic gestures. What counts as real action?
Well, real action usually has at least three levels. First, personal habits, wasting less, using energy more efficiently, reducing unnecessary consumption, taking care with water waste, and learning how local environmental systems work. Second, community action like cleanups, tree planting, school programs, habitat restoration, local advocacy, and better planning. Third, structural action, supporting policies, infrastructure, and institutions that protect health and the environment over the long term. We need to vote, and force leaders to adhere to reasonable conservation measures.
Now, Dr. Weaver, I really like that breakdown there. One extreme is pretending that all you need to do is bring your own shopping bag and the world is saved. And the other extreme is to say, well, individual choices don't matter at all. Both extremes are just too simplistic.
Oh, that is absolutely right on. Earth Day should not become a guilt festival or empty theater. It should become a reminder that stewardship works best when habits, communities, and institutions move together.
And there's also an educational side, putting on my professor hat. Earth Day
Yeah.
gives teachers, parents, and local leaders a chance to explain why environmental systems matter in the first place. People protect what they understand.
And what they feel connected to. Right,
Yes,
Dr. Weaver?
yes. Connection matters. A child who grows up walking in parks, noticing birds, understanding rivers, gardening, or learning where food comes from may see the natural world less as background scenery and more as something alive and worth defending. So, is Earth Day still effective? What happens when government pulls back? What do you think, Chandler?
Well, I'm going to ask my good friend Dr. Deneen here. Let me ask a skeptical question here to you. Some people might say, oh, Earth Day is nice, but has it become too ceremonial, too commercial, too easy? What are your thoughts, Dr.
Well,
Deneen?
Chandler, that criticism is not completely unfair. Public observances can become routine, but routine does not automatically mean meaningless. Earth Day still creates a shared moment when schools, communities, civic groups, news outlets, and governments all pause to talk about the state of the natural world. That kind of common focus still matters.
Well, Dr. Deneen, I think that's a very good point. Repetition is not always a weakness. We repeat elections, for example, memorial days, public health campaigns, and national anniversaries because societies need recurring reminders of what they claim to value.
So maybe the better question is whether or not Earth Day is repeated, but whether it still leads anywhere.
Yeah, you're right, Chandler. If Earth Day becomes a substitute for action, then it becomes shallow. But if it serves as a checkpoint, a yearly moment to ask whether air, water, land, and climate policy are moving in a better or worse direction, then it still has real value.
And that question feels especially timely right now. As of early 2026, the EPA under Administrator Lee Zeldin has announced a major deregulatory push, including what the agency describes as eliminating the 2009 greenhouse gas endangerment finding and later federal greenhouse gas standards for vehicles and engines. The EPA also finalized the repeal of certain 2024 amendments to the Mercury and Air Toxics Standards Rule.
Now, Dr. Weaver, let me hand this directly to you. When people hear the term rollbacks or when people hear the term deregulation, what do those mean in plain English for our environment?
Huh. Not anything particularly good.
Didn't think
In,
so.
in plain English, it usually means the federal baseline becomes less strict. And when the federal baseline becomes less strict, the likely result is more room for pollution, more uncertainty about enforcement, and greater dependence on states, cities, courts, and private industry to fill the gap, which is not always something that happens. That does not mean every river suddenly becomes filthy or every air quality measure collapses overnight, but it does mean the nation or the national government is pulling back from some of the guardrails that were designed to limit emissions and toxic exposure. You know, you mentioned several different things. Mercury poisoning, it's a real thing. And if you've ever seen someone who has had severe mercury poisoning, they're institutionalized. That costs extra money too. Not only that, but it costs a life. It's a serious change.
Yes, Dr. Weaver, I have to agree with you. It is a very serious change. And the pullback is not only domestic. In January 2025, the White House ordered the United States to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. And the UN Climate Registry shows that withdrawal took effect on January 27th, 2026. The White House also moved in January 2026 to withdraw the United States from the broader UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the central treaty system behind global climate talk. So, Dr. Deneen, that means that the United States is not just loosening rules at home, but it's also stepping back from international coordination.
Yes, that's the significance. The United States is reducing both domestic regulatory pressure and international engagement at the same time. Historically, that matters because environmental protection is not only local, air pollution crosses borders, climate systems cross borders, oceans cross borders. If a large industrial power steps back, that affects diplomacy, long term planning, funding, and global trust.
Yeah. And Chandler, Here is the practical meaning. If the United States eases environmental rules and also distances itself from major climate agreements, then environmental progress becomes more fragmented. Some states and cities may keep moving forward. Some companies may continue investing in cleaner technologies. Citizens may still organize, vote, conserve, and innovate, but nationally and internationally, the signal becomes weaker. The message shifts from we are coordinating a response to each sector is increasingly on its own. Now, that can slow progress and make long term environmental problems harder to manage. This is partly an inference from the policy changes, but it follows directly from federal rollbacks and the withdrawals themselves.
So, Earth Day, Dr. Weaver, in a moment like this, becomes more than a celebration, it becomes a measuring stick.
Yeah, I think so. Earth Day asks whether we are moving towards stewardship or away from it. And in a period of a regulatory retreat, the holiday takes on a sharper purpose. It becomes a reminder that environmental protection is not self sustaining. It has to be defended, renewed, and sometimes it has to actually be rebuilt, as I think we're seeing now. What do you have to say, Chandler?
Well, I think history really does support that point, Dr. Weaver. The original Earth Day 56 years ago in 1970 mattered because public pressure pushed environmental protection into the center of national life. If policy now moves in the opposite direction, then the lesson of Earth Day is not despair, but it is that public priorities still matter. People, communities, and institutions can still shape what's next.
Yeah, one of the very quick things to say here is we all know that there's a difference between long term thinking and planning and short term gratification, right, Chandler? Right, Dr. Deneen?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, so short term would say, don't worry about all this environmental crap, right? The long term thinking is going to say, hey, that crap is going to cost us a hell of a lot more down the road if we don't do something about it now. We must, because it will hit you in the pocketbook. I guarantee it. So, as we start to close, I think Earth Day asks a basic human question. Do we think of ourselves as owners of the world around us or as temporary caretakers?
And if we're caretakers, then neglect is not, it is not neutral. It has consequences.
Historically, Earth Day emerged because enough people decided that environmental damage was not just unfortunate but unacceptable. That remains its enduring lesson. Public awareness can become public will, and public will can become change.
And in 2026, the phrase our power, our planet captures something important, not perfection, not instant solutions, but responsibility shared across communities, generations, and nations, even though we've pulled out of that contract.
Unfortunately, but Earth Day at its best is a reminder that the planet is not just where history happens, it's actually a part of the story itself, a very important part.
And whether we are talking about air quality, water safety, wise land use, climate, or conservation, the stakes are never purely abstract. They are social, economic, medical, and moral.
Yeah, and that's a good place to end. Earth Day is not only about celebrating nature, it's about recognizing dependence, interdependence, responsibility, and consequences.
And maybe also gratitude.
Yes, gratitude with work attached. Thank you for joining us on Things You Don't Know.
Fight for our planet. Please fight for it because it's the only one we have.
Well, for Dr. Deneen and Chandler Foster and me, I say goodbye for now. Take care of yourselves and take care of the world we live in.